Welcome to this video about Percy Shelley's poem, The Mask of Anarchy, which the exam board used a few years ago as the unseen extract for the political and social protest task. This is for Section A, Paper 2, for those of you doing English Literature B for A level. This was challenging, I think, because this was the first time the exam board had used a poem as the unseen extract. The exam board had always said, well, we might one day, and years went by and they kept with prose and drama, and more years went by, and then suddenly we had this poem come up. So I think for some students it might have flummoxed them a little bit because they might not have practiced unseen extracts with poetry before. But from memory, I think students dealt with it very well, very resiliently, despite that challenging context. So the aim of this video is very similar to all of the other videos that I have done for Unseen Extracts, which you can find in my Unseen Extracts playlist. Five aims really: to begin by just reminding you of the task and question, then to go through the synopsis box at the top of the extract, to read and analyse the extract, and in so doing connecting the poem to the elements of the genre, and then finishing off by showing you the opening paragraph to a possible essay, just to show you kind of how you might want to organise your ideas. And in part of that as well, there's also an essay plan that I'm giving you as well. So the question is always the same. It's on the left-hand side here. And as is always the case with Lit B, we know that every answer you write will be out of 25 marks. AQA really like the word significance, and that word means that they give you the ability to make your own judgments based on what you regard to be important parts of the text. So that means that you basically have free reign. They don't limit you by saying you have to talk about this, that, and the other. It's for you to discuss what you want to discuss in your essay. The task, therefore, is always the same as well, because the question is always the same. You need to read the extract several times, as well as the synopsis box. You need to annotate the extract in a way that suits you. So, if it's detailed annotations, then it's detailed. If it isn't, it isn't. But to annotate it in a way that helps you. And then when you're writing the response, as well as writing the essay plan, to connect the elements of PSPW to the extract, political and social protest writing, that means. So you are hitting AO4. Essentially what the examiner is doing is they're saying you've spent a year at least studying 3 texts in class which are linked together with this genre. We should be able to give you something that you've never read before, and you be able to tell us what elements you can see. There are many, many similarities. So you might notice a similarity, for example, between a text you read in class and something you're noticing in this extract. So that's why the unseen extract really draws upon your ability to think about those texts that you did in class. So at the top of the extract, the exam board will be writing for you a synopsis box or a summary box. And it's important that students engage with it because it's been written for a reason. The examiner is basically saying, we know you've never read this extract before, and we know that this exam is important to you, so we're going to help you. And students that ignore or forget to look at this box will often have a harder time of it because they will miss important things which the exam board is telling them. So this gives us an opportunity to make sure that what we're saying is kind of on the right track. And they will always give you the most important information. They won't give you, a lot of information, but they will give you information that will help you to be on the right track in your discussion of the extract. So this is the extract that came up this year. And the question that I always ask students is, what clues are we told here? What would you highlight in this box that you would want to take forward in your analysis of the extracts, regardless of whether it's prose, poetry, or drama? So you can pause this video now and write down what you would want to use, what you think is important. Or if you've got the exam paper in front of you, you might want to highlight that paper and annotate that box now. Or you can carry on watching the video and we can go through some of the significant clues that we're given in this box. So here we have a number of different clues which all link in some way to the study of literature or the study of political and social protest writing. So we've got the word anarchy, which means violence and civil unrest, which is juxtaposed with the phrase peaceful protest, which, of course, whenever you've got the word protest, and the word protest is also in the module of this course, then you know that that's going to be important. So we have peaceful protesting versus violence, and violence is another element of the genre as well. And you might have studied a text in class where there has been kind of violence in it, such as the Kite Runner, for example. So violence can often be a means of control. It can often be a tyrannical force. It can also be a totalitarian, authoritarian force as well. So violence can be an element of the genre. 1819 means we're coming towards the end of the Romantic era, and Shelley is a Romantic poet with a capital R, almost into the Victorian era, but not quite. So we're talking here about Shelley embodying perhaps the mindset and trends that Romantic poets often embodied. So if you have done any research on Romanticism, this might be useful. We've got democracy in pink. So, of course, democracy can often be a fundamental principle in these kind of texts because it's often what people want to defend. Protests can often be caused by people feeling that a democratic right or rights are being lost, and therefore they're trying to defend those rights. Things like freedom of speech, fair courts, elected governments, fair taxes, all this kind of stuff. And to create that kind of equality, I suppose. Violently attacked again reinforces the fact that we have got this contrast between this legitimate way of protesting peacefully and this idea of violence being used with impunity. And in this extract, what has happened is that during a protest, armed soldiers have stormed into an unarmed crowd, killing 6 and wounding many others. And whenever you've got the word unarmed, it means that there's a degree of inequality there. They're unable to defend themselves, and it results in bloodshed. At the bottom paragraph there, we're told that this is the end of the poem, which might be a climactic ending. So if this is a dramatic poem, chances are that we're moving towards some kind of climax at the end, because the tone and the register of this poem is designed to be spoken with some rousing, stirring kind of language. It's supposed to be making people kind of work together in that sense of collectivism. It reminds me a little bit of the Henry V Battle of Agincourt speech, which again is very similar in the sense that it's delivered by someone in order to kind of create a sense of stirring of the emotions. And when people are stirred in terms of emotions, chances are they're more likely to act a certain way. And of course, strength in numbers. It's far more powerful to have strength in numbers than to be on your own. So the person that delivers the speech is a person called Hope. We don't actually know Hope's gender. Hope is, of course, more of a female name. So some students, when they did this extract, gave Hope female pronouns. But we don't actually know. So Hope is this kind of omniscient speaker, and they are representative of optimism and the idea of what is right and just. And what's essentially happening is the unarmed crowd, the people in the unarmed crowd, are being told that it's perfectly fine and legitimate for them to protest peacefully. That's a legitimate form of protest, and the law also allows that to happen. So she's trying to make them all believe in that, and she's trying to foster this sense of collectivism as well. So that is what this summary box tells us. Hope is really trying to tell us that they have to remain firm. So there's lots of language in this poem which is to do with quite firm and defensive body language, like folded arms, for example. So that is important information because it can help students go onto the right track in terms of when they analyse the poem and the text, properly when they start reading it. So in the next part of the video, I'm going to go through each of the stanzas 2 by 2 with some significant annotations around the outside, which might be useful if you are annotating the text in preparation for writing the response. Okay, so there we have the annotation. So hopefully that was useful for you if you're going to be annotating the poem for some ideas. So at this point, students have a choice. They could, for example, research the Peterloo Massacre, and I deliberately didn't mention that up until this point because it wasn't mentioned in the summary box, and therefore I wouldn't expect students to know it. Some might have done. But a lot of students did not know that the massacre was the Peterloo Massacre, and that was what prompted this poem to be written. So at this point, for the purposes of studying and research, you might want to go and find out more about that now. Noticeably, and hopefully you notice this in the annotations, which we have two main semantic fields, one which is to do with nature and the other which is to do with war. But more importantly, on this slide here, we have on the right-hand side a possible essay plan, and I want to emphasise the fact that it's possible because there are a number of ways to write this essay and a number of different ways that you could organise your ideas. But students often like to see an example so they know kind of what to follow. The examiner doesn't specify how many paragraphs you should write, so in this case I'm going to write 3 paragraphs here. But most importantly, the examiner does specify that for all extract-based questions, so Section A Paper 1 and Section A Paper 2, students must write an overview. So for extract questions, Section A's, such as this, students need to begin their essay with an overview. And the bullet points under each of those subheadings there tells you what I would intend to include in each of those paragraphs. So once I've done the overview and I've kind of introduced hope and the way in which this poem is delivered, I would then talk about the armed soldiers and I would then talk about the crowd. And using this kind of structure, I'd be able to create this juxtaposition between the peaceful protesters and this idea of violence from the armed soldiers. And I would tie in there the semantic fields, which I've included on the bottom left of the screen. So this video finishes with an example opening paragraph. This could be an example overview. So unlike other videos, I haven't given you the whole essay here. I've just given you the beginning. Of course, some students might have found the poem as the unseen extract is better because you're dealing with less text maybe, I don't know. But some students might have liked the structure of a poem that a piece of prose might not give them. So that might be worth mentioning as well. But anyway, this could be an example of an opening overview. So the extract is an example of a dramatic poem spoken by an omniscient speaker, Hope. Hope offers the masses and readers a rousing and rallying cry that peaceful protest is a legitimate form of protest which is at odds with the callous violence and savageness shown by the armed soldiers. Hope's dramatic speech is delivered in iambic tetrameter with a notable rhyme scheme which reinforces Hope's message, as does the use of a mainly trochaic rhythm, which rallies the crowd and acts as a persuasive force to present the view that peaceful protest is a lawful and justified form of protest, perhaps superior to the violence the armed soldiers carry out. The poem is delivered on a battleground as if Hope is rallying the troops, and the language often veers towards the patriotic, with images of England, such as forests and lions, to rouse the crowd more. The central juxtaposition is the presentation of pacifism exhibited by the crowd with violence and bloodshed exhibited by the soldiers. So that could be an example of how you begin the poem. And of course, I have got some quite high-level terminology in there, iambic tetrameter and trochees. So it might be useful as part of revision to just go away and remind yourself of some rhythm and rhyme terminology. Tetrameter means you've mainly got a poem written or verse written in 8 syllables per line. And trochee is also with the stress. It means that the stress of a word features at the beginning of the word. So it's a very heavy kind of monotonous rhythm. So what this student is saying here is that they have linked the way the poem is delivered, the rhythm and rhyme, to the message. Now, if this student had just simply said it's written in trochees, it probably would have been less successful because the examiner would have said, well, so what? So what they've done is they have linked the trochees to the message and the characterization of hope. So there's a relevance made there to the methods, the poetic methods here. So it's better that way. They haven't just said it's written in tetrameter. They've said actually there's a point to it. So rather than just plonking in these terms, it's actually more successful to think about, well, why? Why have those terms been used by the writer in this case? So that is an example of how you might want to begin. Okay, and then after that, you would obviously write the other paragraphs where you go into the poem in more detail. So that is a video all to do with The Mask of Anarchy, the first poem that ever came up for this unseen extract task for political and social protest. So hopefully that has been useful to you. Again, of course, we never know. A poem might come up this year again, but it could also be prose and drama. We just simply don't know until the day. But as I've already said, have a look at my Unseen Extracts playlist for more videos about Paper 2 Section A. I've got some, you know, extracts that have actually come up in the past, Winslow Boy, Fahrenheit 451. I've also made some of my own, though, to help with this as well, so that might be useful too. Okay, so good luck, and thank you very much for watching.